Hey there, welcome along to Navigating the Shift. Annabelle and Sarah here. We have loads of topics to talk about today. And we thought we'd start off with the election that's just happened in Virginia in America. Did you have some info on it?
Well, I think it's the beginning of the shift in politics, because Virginia has historically been a blue or Democrat state for a long time, really heavily. And these last elections, which were governor, lieutenant governor, district attorney, big ones for the state, it's a sweep of Republicans of red. Only by, like, the governor was only by a few point margin. But, oh my God, one thing that I think is the important point about this is either we now have control of the elections or they don't, or we have enough control that even though they do their stuff, they can't win. Or
are you talking about altering things, altering the results?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Or the White Hats had control in 2020, but they deliberately didn't use it so that we could see the results. Yeah. So now they're starting to use it. They're saying, nope, we're gonna not let you get away with this stuff. So that's the beginning of a big political shift. And we've been talking about, okay, this is when the shifts are starting. Here's when it's happening. And that's a little piece of evidence to that.
So that single letter that we were following for such a long time, for a few years now, 17th letter, that also talked about 11.3. Do you remember that?
Right.
It's 11.3 or 11.2.
That's right.
Which is right now. It's right on now. And I kept wondering, what would that be about? I mean, it's obviously going to be American dates. It's not going to be our dates. It's not the 11th of March. So what is that about? And we had another thing happen here. I did talk about a couple of weeks ago about Ricardo Bossi, who you've seen as well, from the Australia One Party, saying that the end of October is the deadline. You switch sides to the side of the people, or there is no amnesty, I think is the right word, after that. And I'm like, ooh, come on, what are we going to see? We're going to see some arrests, or what's going to happen? So since then, it was just all quiet on the Western Front for a couple of days. But now I only just noticed this morning that every mainstream media outlet that I looked on, and I'm just going to show you a video of it right now, because there's no point in me giving you a link because it'll be different the next time you look into the link. But every single mainstream media outlet has very few mentions at all of the current topic of conversation that we've been talking about for the last year and a half. Before, it's always the top headline of how many cases there are and any other excuse of why we need to shut down a bit longer, it's all gone. Now, a few days ago, I don't know how long ago it was, they started talking about a little girl missing called Cleo Smith. Great name, right? You'll never be able to track a girl called Smith. You will not be able to find her parents. You won't know where she's from. So I'm going, okay, what's this one about? Because we haven't heard anything about missing children for the whole of this event. That event has just completely dominated the news forecasts. There is nothing else that happens in the world, apparently, according to media. And then suddenly here's this little girl pops up. Oh, my God, she's missing. Oh, we have to look for her. And I'm like, okay, so what's that about? And then yesterday, I think, or the day before, she's found in a house, and here's the footage of the policeman coming in and finding her. Okay, so why is this so much a feature? And I think it is that because suddenly we need a distraction away from the fact that the main headlines are different, just like that, suddenly different. Now we've passed the end of October. We need something else to grab people's attention so they can talk about it on social media. And so it's everywhere. You'll see on these videos that I'm showing you now, there are articles about her and all how they like to fill out all the content with every little aspect of the story, just to try and distract you away from the fact, that we're no longer talking about an illness or a mandate. Very interesting. Now, whether it's just for the day, I don't know, but let's keep watching and see if that has gone poof, disappeared.
Well, my read on that is that there's some messaging going on there, because it's probably not a real event, but it's set up to send a message. And part of it is, here's something we can look at. It's a missing girl. Let's get all crazy. You think, it's another loose trap, right? But then really quickly, it's good news. She's found. I assume she's fine, blah, blah, blah. that's like, to me, that is signaling there's not going to be any more loose traps.
Okay. Makes
Could
sense.
be. Could be.
Mm.
And then the other thing that I've noticed, and it's a big deal, of course, is this switch, as the guy from CNN predicted, from pandemic to climate change.
Right.
And there's
And
the
that's
big
been quick.
meeting and all of that. And then even Newsweek, I think it was Newsweek, came out with an article about Mr. B falling asleep during the opening speeches. Now, what I saw was that some people are just going, "Oh my God, he says it's so important. He can't even stay awake, and he can't be president." Blah blah blah. But then some people, this article says, are sympathetic to him. He's just had this big time change because he's been traveling, and oh my God, that's everybody knows how tired that makes you. And these opening speeches are so boring. Everybody knows that. You can see people on their phones, and I'm like, yeah,
unbelievable. They're the slow ones. The late adopters, you might say.
yeah. And they're all repeating the same thing, blah, blah, blah. And it is boring. But one of the things you learn if you're a politician is how to pretend like you're interested in something when you're not, so that's.
I think he flew there on a private jet as well, which I think
and
that's
so did
absolutely
everybody.
perfect for a climate change meeting.
And it's coming out. It's even in some of the mainstream media, all Bezos and everybody
Musk.
else is all, yes, Musk and Biden, they're all flying, and he drives in his 85 car cavalcade to get there.
Wow.
So it's like not just one plane, not just Air Force One, all these other planes full of people. Now, evidently that's really common. I know somebody who used to be in the Foreign Service who would set up meetings or visits from various people, presidents and vice presidents and secretaries of states and so forth. And they always brought huge entourages. And one of the problems was you had to figure out in these like African countries, for instance, how do you put up 500 people?
Right.
I mean, it's
the
ridiculous.
Logistics of it.
Mm-hmm. And how much can they shrink their entourage? Because we don't have that many places, and who can put them in their homes? That is millions of dollars worth of travel and personnel that goes to each one of these little events.
Right. So, yeah. But I think the fact that so many people are laughing at it already, and I've noticed even on social media that there are at least a couple of people that have been so way behind us, you might say, and pushing the media narrative in the last week, perhaps, have flipped. It's not like they're saying, I suddenly understand, my eyes are open. Not like that. They're just immediately now critical of all the things that we are critical of. So, yeah, things are moving in the right direction there, I think.
Yeah.
What do you think about Alec Baldwin and his shot? Did you pick up anything intuitively about that event?
My sense of it is that it's not the story that they're telling us.
Mm-hmm.
That they happen to have the perfect camera person there with the camera to take a picture of them, in front of the fake backdrop on the phone, looking really upset. And when you've got the perfect people there to grab the perfect picture, that always makes me go,
Things that make you go,
So one part of it, I think, is that it's a way to cover up the fact that he's been picked up and processed.
Yes.
And the other part is I think there's signaling in there. And that's part I'm not really sure, because that whole thing of what's on the set and live, 500 rounds of ammunition, and is it live or is it not? And there's been problems before and all that. I haven't figured that one out. Do you have anything on that?
Oh, also very curious that the armorer was like a 24-year-old girl or something. Just didn't sound like she was qualified at all. But yeah, when that first came up, I didn't see all the detail that you're talking about. I haven't seen that yet. But when I was tuning in, it felt like, yeah, they actually need an excuse to get him out of the picture, because once this election that you've just talked about that has changed to red, and that all that information that is long overdue and coming out about this word, audit, around this time last year, right? Wasn't it November?
Yeah, about this time, almost a year ago today.
Yeah, almost exactly. Once all that information comes out and they realize that was not good, that they've got a much smoother flow to get into that now. But everybody would turn and see what Alec Baldwin had to say about it. you see? And if you remove him altogether in a convenient way that makes it look like he's really busy with other things right now, then that's a decent excuse for him to suddenly disappear and not have anything to say about it.
To not be on set, you know, and to not say anything about stuff. That's true. The media is talking about how, well, we need to recount this. This election can't be right. There must have been somebody interfering with it. This is not a secure election. Everything they said cannot possibly happen for the last year is what they're starting to say now, because the election didn't go their way. And I think that's going to start to wake some people up as well.
And what about Fauci with his beagles? Have you seen those stories? A number of stories came out about some terrible, terrible, inhumane experiments he was doing on the beagles.
Yes.
It's interesting sometimes when you look at how an audience generally watches Hollywood movies, that if you put a dog in the picture, people will be more concerned about the dog than anybody else. So what was that movie, Independence Day, I think, where, you know, there was big alien ships and everyone's looking and curious about it, and then they shoot fire down and to like basically level every city. And so everybody's running, they've abandoned all their cars on the motorway, they're all running away from the fire. And the person with the dog manages to find a little like a service door inside a motorway tunnel and get out of the flames that are about to go past. And we're all sitting as the audience going, what about the dog? What about the dog? And then this, you know, the golden Labrador flies over an object to get in behind the door and just saved as the flames go past and kill all the people. And everyone, you know, the audience goes, oh, that's all right then. You know, all the people, like, millions of people just died, but the dog survived. Yeah.
So isn't that brilliant timing to bring out the
beagle
story about the beagles? That's what's making people actually flip, which is so crazy.
You just don't know how people work.
Yeah, it's pretty brilliant.
Here's another little video that came out about Fauci, and I just want to see what you think of this.
I'd just like to ask all the jurors to be on mute until you are instructed otherwise. Please proceed, Larry.
Okay. We make it more dramatic, Jason. Okay. This is a dramatic moment because we are presenting today an indictment of Dr. Anthony Fauci. We've had several grand jury sessions. This is the 15th session all in all, but we've had 3, I think perhaps even 4 concerning Dr. Fauci. We've had a number of witnesses who have appeared. Dr. Judy Mikovits, Kent Heckenlively, her partner, Judy Mikovits, who worked with Dr. Fauci, John Cullen, others. Information, evidence that's been presented showing that Fauci collaborated with the communist Chinese, sent the seeds of COVID-19 over to them, arranged for a grant, $3.7 million grant, to further gain-of-function research. We presented testimony from Senator Rand Paul, who confronted him on that as well. And this gave rise to the Chinese. It was reasonably foreseeable, and it was certainly grossly negligent and reckless that they would turn it into a bioweapon. And even if not a bioweapon, that it would be released, because the research that was being done in Wuhan would have been illegal in our Fort Detrick lab, the military lab in Maryland. In addition to that, he's withheld material information to the American people about the short, medium, and long-term effects of these vaccines. He stands to profit from the marketing of these vaccines, which are making trillions of dollars for Big Pharma, for Pfizer, for Moderna, for Johnson & Johnson. The government, if you want to call it that, has pushed these vaccines knowing that in many ways they're dangerous. They're inadequate testing, if no testing at all. Moderna admitted that with regard to pregnant women. Certain groups, blacks and Hispanics, because of the DNA makeup of these groups and other factors, it can be very dangerous for them. Those who already have had, it can trigger a dangerous reaction, which can be deadly. That's not in dispute. Now we know the vaccines don't even work.
Wow. Where is that from? Do you know?
It's a TikTok video. The guy is not wearing a judge's curly wig. I don't know if all of your judges do that. Not necessarily. He's got a nice tie on. He's got an American flag with the gold fringe in the back. And at the beginning they said, will the jurors be quiet? Well, please be muted. So it's kind of weird to be putting that video in the middle of a hearing if there are jurors online. That doesn't seem right to me. However, if that's news is correct, that is huge news.
So I think the thing is, it was probably videoed. Somebody grabbed a piece of it with the pertinent information, and the jurors have already heard that information.
Oh, they would have heard it, but the presentation is to camera.
Interesting. I guess that's one way, they talked about military tribunals and things like that, and confessions and so forth that have supposedly been videotaped that will be released after we get the emergency broadcast system and all those things, if that actually happens.
If it goes
Yeah.
So a tribunal, I don't think a tribunal has a jury, though. That's not trial by jury, is it?
No, right. But this is also an example of a trial.
A grand jury. He said a grand jury.
And he said several grand juries or
50 grand
over
jury.
several. Yeah. Oh, so if they're videotaping it, and this is the first one they're starting to release, that makes sense. Because we've been talking about earlier is, when we're starting to see politics shift, media shift. And this is the beginning of big pharma medical shift.
And gentle disclosure. This is a beautiful way to do it, isn't it? Just a little tiny piece. It's not going to be wham, bang into the mainstream media and everybody's sitting there like that, like at the end of Apple's 1984 video. Everyone's sitting there. The hammer's just been put through the screen, not like that. This is gentle. This is a good way of just very carefully bringing it out.
Interesting. That goes along with some news that's come out. There has been a FDA Advisory Panel regarding giving the children. And they have a quote from one fellow, Eric Rubin, and he says, "But we're never going to learn how safe this is unless we start giving it. That's just the way it goes. That's how we found out about rare complications of other, like the corona."
So who is he? Who's this guy? That's
a quote from a guy named Eric Rubin, who is editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine. This is one of those mainstream journals. And if that gets put out, that means mainstream people are reading that. And who reads that? Medical people. And they're going to go, red flag, right?
Yeah. Because they know that you need to have proper medical trials for each thing. So,
and we all know this hasn't had that. But they evidently don't. They think somehow a vaccine that takes 10 years to be made can somehow magically be made in 9 months.
Yeah. No, that's really good. Really good. One that happened about a week ago was in Japan. There's a message here that it's from a radio show, so I'm not sure if it's exactly legit. I haven't checked this media outlet. But they say that Japan has dropped their rollout and they've widely distributed the IV drug and the numbers have plummeted.
I read that too.
And another one from the European Union, this guy with a Spanish accent is showing the contract between the EU and Big Pharma about the rollout products being all heavily redacted. So that's also come up here in Australia. At the moment, there is an ICAC inquiry. I can't remember what ICAC stands for, but I'll put it on the bottom of the screen. This is a corruption inquiry against the Premier that resigned from New South Wales. So that kicked in very quickly about corruption, generally speaking, but there has been word as well about the fact that she had received millions of dollars from lobbyists that represented the rollout product companies, right? So Pfizer and AstraZeneca in particular, to continue on with this agenda, to keep pushing this agenda. They were directly paying government officials. So as that information starts coming out, you can bet that'll be all over the world, everywhere.
Yes, it's happening. Ugh. I noticed some relief. Some of my relief also has to do with getting rain. So I live in the area of California that's gotten fires every year. I get evacuated the first big fire. My house ended up being safe, but you can't breathe. You're wearing masks before everybody else was, just so you don't have a horrible headache, but also being evacuated. And I know people who lost homes and so forth. We got almost 6 inches of rain in 24 hours, plus rain before and after.
Ooh.
It was what they call atmospheric river, came along, and we don't usually get rain until like November, and this happened in the middle of October. So that happens, and my plants in the garden are like, grow! That magnetized water is so powerful.
That's
You've
it.
had that experience too. And I have well water, so I'm not putting chemically bad stuff on my plants. But still, when they get that water that's falling through the sky and it gets all that magnetic zammy, they just go from, okay, we're sprouting, to, hi, nice to see you. It's like, woo, it's nice. But at any rate, the shoulders drop just a little because, okay, we're not going to burn this year. But also, I think there's sort of I've read a bunch of people talking about this on Twitter just in the last week or so, feeling of an easing up of the heaviness and the, oh God, can I get through this? That shows we're starting to flip.
Yeah, I think it is. And there's a lot of changes happening here as well. Like there's been a guy called Graham Hood, and he's now got Hoodies Helpers. He was a Qantas. Qantas is our national airline, a Qantas pilot who resigned, and he looks like he was near the end anyway, like in his late 50s, early 60s. He would have been close to resigning anyway. But he left because of the mandates, and he became the most outspoken, and people love him. And he's a pilot, There's people coming from all walks of life that are really taking the lead in this, all walks of life, which I really love. But he was talking about how down in Victoria, it's so bad down there, it's getting far worse, that the premier there, Daniel Andrews, who has done all this dictatorial stuff, is trying to force through a new legislation which gives him basically total dictatorial power the next time there is a pandemic. That he doesn't need to consult anybody, not even scientists or the health advisor or anybody, and that he can do whatever he likes. And he has literally locked out some members of parliament because they refused to show their medical papers to get in, regardless of whether they said yes or no to taking the rollout. He's locked them out because they won't give that information. And yet when the public rang government and said, well, can you give me the information, the medical records? The answer was, no, the Privacy Act covers medical records. It's like, well, what about everybody else? Is it rules for one person and not the other? So there's become a pirate government of all these MPs that have been locked out of their own parliament, that are building together and trying to get the people behind them to get back into parliament to be able to argue against this dictatorial thing. But what the pilot was saying is that public are actually starting to turn their back on all of the old systems. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? And he says there are people offering land where you can put your camper van or your tent, because it's coming into summer, so it's not too challenging. We are organising food distribution. We have school teachers that have been locked out of their jobs. They are reorganising homeschooling areas. We are organising housing and shelter and medical, all the medical people that have been locked out. I'm like, oh my God, this is literally it. This is the new way that we are heading towards, that we've known for all these years, you and I have, that this is what the new world is about. They are forming right there in Victoria.
Wow, that's amazing.
Isn't
the
it?
tightest squeeze births the most amazing pearl.
Yeah.
No, I mix my metaphor. Diamond.
That sounded like a poop. Yeah, we don't want that.
the tightest, hardest squeeze crushes the dirty coal and produces the perfect diamond. Let's go.
Much
with that
better.
one.
I like that.
I'm the queen
cleaner.
of mixed metaphors. I'll tell you, queen of mixed metaphors. But at any rate, it gives my family lots of amusement, and I don't mind so much. I've known a couple of airline pilots before, and I like them. They seem to be really awesome people. They're willing to take huge bunch of people's lives in their hands. So I came across a audio recording, and I can't authenticate it, but it's supposedly a Southwest Airlines pilot. He goes, hi, this is your captain. Welcome to flight, blah, 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 from here to there. He goes, so this airplane is under a mask mandate because of the coronavirus, which doesn't exist. And he goes on and says, I encourage you not to wear a mask. And if you want to talk, come on up to the cockpit. Although FAA recommends for safety reasons that we keep our door closed and locked, I welcome you to come on in and have a chat. Just don't be wearing a mask. Okay, so we're approaching now, and it just goes on with regular airline stuff. And there's a couple other little gems in there about Trump, he's still our president, and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, I wanted so bad to be on that plane and hear that. I would have laughed so hard, the whole plane would have stared at me. I swear, although there, everybody would have been laughing probably too at this point, or at least 80%. I mean, some people will probably be going, oh my God, can they say that? But think of it.
But when they see the majority of the plane laughing, right, they'll realize that it's their reaction that's not normal anymore, and that the other reaction has become normal.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, and if you look at that election picture, you can see how many people have changed. That is normal now. They understand. They're seeing it now. That's far more. That's faster than I expected. The percentage of people that are waking up. It's brilliant.
Yes. Well, I think a lot of people have woken up before that, because the only reason the current administration is in place is because of particular actions that they're talking about. 80% of the people voted for Trump in real life. Or he had a landslide, and even California was supposedly flipped red. So people have been flipping. It's just that the media has been maintaining the opinion and putting out the propaganda that isn't happening. Plus, because of all that propaganda, the people on our side hesitate to speak out. And the people on their side tend to be really worked up, for some reason, very angry and judgmental. No wonder the majority of people aren't going to say anything, because they're going to get attacked. Right. The Karens chasing you around the store for not wearing your mask or not wearing it right. I mean, Lord have mercy.
But they're speaking with their votes by the looks of things. So that's good. I know we've got upcoming local government voting as well. And
is that for your state or more local?
No, for our little, like our county, our version of a county. We call it our local council, local government area. But our mayor recently got tossed out by the other councillors. They threw him out and put in another person. I say person because this is what they look like. The fact that there is doubt even amongst the councillors must make the people around wonder what on earth is going on in terms of corruption, because that guy was tied up in it for many years. And so to have him finally tossed out, he's still up for the vote, but we'll just see what happens this time around as to how my little local area is doing in terms of waking up.
Yeah. Oh, I just wanted to mention this crazy commercial for Twix candy.
Okay.
And it opens up with a little kid in a princess costume sitting on the floor in the living room, and there's a knock on the door, and a woman in full black witch costume says, "Hi, I'm your new nanny." And he closes the door. "I don't need a new nanny." She shows up inside anyway and says, "Well, evidently your parents think you do." She doesn't appear evil at any rate. And the kid says, "I still have my princess uniform on, or a costume on." Says, "Well, do you want to wear it?" "Yeah." "All right, then let's go." And they show up, and a little boy comes over and yells at the kid, who you're becoming aware is a boy, and says, "You look like a girl. Only girls wear dresses, and that's your nanny. She looks weird. You're both weird." And the witch nanny is just taking care of the poor little kid who's cross-dressing, builds up a huge storm, and then goes whoom, and the other kid gets blown away, and you just see in his costume, which had a superhero cape on it, flopping to the ground. And then the kid asked the nanny, "Will he ever come down?" She said, "Yeah, maybe." And they walk off arm in arm. What a lot of crazy messaging there. Right? If somebody questions your cross-dressing or your outfit, it's nice and appropriate to destroy them, to kill them, to be violent against them. And it's also this idea that the evil witch is really a good guy.
Yeah. That little kids shouldn't complain about strangers suddenly arriving in their house. That there is no parent.
Too.
There's no parent that actually says, "Actually, yes, this is your nanny."
Yes.
Right? Just a stranger that arrives at the door. So many things wrong with that ad.
And if you think about the elite and their religious practices, this is a cute little Halloween version of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yet when
nice.
when I tune into those people, they just feel long gone. Again, even right now when I'm tuning, like I think I told you before how I pictured when somebody was talking about, it's a something moon and this is their ritual time, and I'm like, no, their halls are not only empty, they're dusty. But even while I'm tuning in right now, I just can't feel any of them around anymore. So there might have been a lot of arrests that happened that we just didn't notice about. There was the sound of a helicopter around here, but I could hear it for like maybe 40 minutes, really close by. And I kept going out the front and the back of the house and I couldn't see it.
Well, I've seen on Twitter, I think, people talking about hearing helicopters and not seeing them. And there's some kind of camouflaged, perhaps military.
Unless it was low down, like it was on the ground somewhere. But we wouldn't leave it running for 40 minutes, would you? Or no, it can seem to be, I think if it goes up, then it probably echoes around the place. So if I go out the back, it sounds like it might be there. And if I go out the front, it sounds like it might be there. So it's very confusing. So I'm very close to a park that runs along the edge of the water, right? We're near a little kind of inlet bay. And all of that park used to be a huge psychiatric hospital. And it's absolutely chock-a-block full of underground tunnels there. Right.
And when you went and visited it, you noticed Tartarian type architecture one, and they tried to chase you away from the property, right?
Yeah, there's one compound in the middle that's highly suspicious where that ancient looking tower is, and the security guard said you better get away. Yes.
You were outside a fence or a gate, right? You weren't going into the property?
No, just looking through the gate. They didn't want me looking through the gate.
Little suspicious.
Very suspicious. But yeah, so there's that, but there's also like a function venue there. So whether they were sitting there waiting for the bride to come out or something, I don't know. It was more like a Monday or a Tuesday night, though. It's unlikely to be a wedding down there at the function venue. So I don't know what it was. Just, you notice all these little tiny things and you never quite know what it is. There was this video that came out this morning, which is brilliant, of an Australian nurse. So down in South Australia, this is a much smaller state and population-wise. They don't have as many people there. And they've just had 3,000 workers removed because of the mandates, because they're refusing. And she is standing out the front being really bold and saying that in ICU, in the hospital at the moment, 30 out of 38 of the people that are in ICU, because of the Rollout products. She said the vast majority of people in hospital overall are from the Rollout products. She said the adverse reactions are out of control, and she was talking about myocarditis, which is a problem with the heart. She says it's rare anyway, rare altogether, but you would never see it in somebody in their 20s. And yet she said somebody just died in her care who was in their 20s from myocarditis. And so she was really pushing the truth. You could see all the microphones had the label of mainstream media people. So let's see if they do it. I mean, before we just go, no, they're never going to say this.
They wouldn't even be there.
No, they wouldn't, but they were there. And they were asking her questions. It was a 7-minute long video or something. I'll link you to it. It'll be on BitChute, just in case, just to be safe, to make sure it doesn't disappear. So what will be interesting is to see if they report anything from that at all. Because if they even give us the slightest inkling that they are going to report it, we know for sure they've definitely flipped.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, it's still on the other side, though. There's ads like on the side of buses and stuff like that saying children and young people get heart attacks too.
Oh, I saw that. How ridiculous. And
It's
will
bad.
people just go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, that's not normal.
And unfortunately, it's not just the people who got the experiment. It's the people who are exposed to them for some of the things that they shed. And I can tell you from experience.
I know.
I got very sick. I had heart palpitations, blood clots, huge body pain, high fever, all of that. Knocked me out for months.
It's all still very confusing though, right? Because if you listen to that video we just had before, about the guy saying we're doing the grand jury, that the seed, he said the seed was taken to Wuhan and given over so that they could experiment gain of function, right? So that's talking about something that's legitimately a pathogen by the sound of things, right? A bioweapon. And yet we also have things like Rainer Mitch, we call him now because of his American accent of his German name, saying that it does not exist. So there's still some confusion around, even in court cases. We're talking about court cases here, not just one expert versus another. There is still some confusion as to what we're dealing with here. Now, Michelle Fielding did an extraordinarily long question session with an American tarot reader the other day. They were both looking at this as well as to what the mix was. And the answer they or one of them came up with was that it's been in flu jabs from the previous years, several years before. And that kind of makes sense because I've had a number of people that I know who have taken it, and then the next winter they get far worse, illness than they did the year before when they actually had it. So you've got this long gap where it slowly breaks down the immunity. And then when you get to flu season, then they get sick, you see. It's a great way to make it difficult to track and trace how that happened.
Very sneaky.
Yeah. Now, I know you would not have had something the previous year, but
Never.
if you have people that plan these things in such a sophisticated way, you can bet they'll find some other way to make people sick. So whether it's a pathogen that was, done in Wuhan and actually managed to somehow spread to the entire world within a couple of weeks, or whether that was made up and they're just making people sick through other means, all of it is possible at this stage. It'd be interesting to see what comes out and the truth in the end.
Well, I think the confusion about it is it's not a consistent product.
Yeah, that too. Did you see that article in the UK media outlet called The Expose, which talked about a high death rate in America was caused by just 5% of the batches of the rollout?
5%. That actually feels pretty close.
Feels like it to me too. So it's just certain batches that would knock people instantly, and all the others might have come as complications from the previous year or whatever.
The person who I was exposed to had been vaccinated 3 months earlier, so it wasn't an instant reaction, but he works in hospitals all across the country, so would be exposed to a lot of other people, and described his illness that wasn't as bad as mine as being the sickest he's ever been. So that's not, 3 months or so or more, even possibly after the I don't think that was that huge reaction would be just from that. I think it had to be being exposed to other people who more recently had that experience.
And who knows what they're putting in the water or what's falling from the air. What is that white crap that keeps splattering on my plants outside whenever it rains? Not well, it's raining now, I'll go out and check, but certainly all of last year and the year before, that whenever it rains, there was just this white splattered kind of film all over the plants, which means it's dropped from the air. That's the only way it could get there. So if they attack us from multiple sides, then it makes it very difficult to figure out what's going on. But it's been cleared up, right?
Yeah, I think I just asked for what percentage of that is now gone, and I got 90-95. There's still a little bit of residual. I've still seen some people who've shown some of those white lines in the sky.
Really?
Photos. Yeah, hasn't happened around here in a long time. So we talked about this before. What triggers the shift, or what triggered now? Since it started happening, are a couple of things. One, that the black hats have to not have ammo. Either it's been taken out, or there's some negotiations which have happened recently that they agreed not to do it. Whether they stick with that or not, we got people watching out for that. But the other part of it is the reading of the frequency, the mass consciousness.
Right.
And the reason is we don't want any events to happen as punishment for speaking some truth. 2, we don't want people to go to war with each other.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of it. There's been a huge divide. You know, the media says it's a pandemic of the unvaccinated. It's like, turn you, like, make you hate us. And those that are in the higher parts of the white hats who can read frequencies and track internet stuff and people's reactions and stuff like that. My read was we had to get to like 80% of the people being consistently shifting. That doesn't mean they're totally awake and aware of everything, but they're starting to break free so that when information comes out, they will be open to it, at least somewhat. And that's just happened recently. Now we hit an 80%, but it's a fluctuating kind of thing as people backtrack, you know, as people do, blah, 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 blah. But it's been consistently at 80% or more in this last week and a half is what my intuitive information came in, which means, okay, now we've got the green light. We can start to do this and it won't cause residual damage, civil war, etc.
Less cognitive dissonance problems.
Yeah, it's frustrating for us who've already known all this stuff for years or decades, but looking at it from their point of view, the goal is to do this as smoothly and easily as possible. If we do end up at some kind of a war at some level, that brings a frequency down and it actually slows the progress even more than delaying until we get this percentage.
Mm-hmm.
It's frustrating, but it's what really works in the long run to get us where we want to go as smoothly and quickly as possible.
Very good signs. Very good. With Australia, I just remember that I had talked before about the original man who was implicated as the kidnapper. The reason for that, I think, is because there's been a lot more coming from some very outspoken original people, which is rare. You just never get to see them do anything at all. But there's this one guy who's pretty cool, and his name on social media and stuff is called Real Romeo. I think his actual name is Romeo, but he's called Real Romeo. And he goes into this really wonderful video, which I'll share with you, where he's interviewing a number of other people, asking them questions about what happened here. How did we end up with these problems in Australia? And what they were saying was along the lines of how the English arrived here and they already knew that the French and the Dutch were here. Well, the French were here at the same time. You'll never hear that in history lessons at school.
No.
And the Dutch were here before that. They have proof because they had mapped it. They've already been here. But when the English arrived and they discovered there are people here, there was an argument about what do we do? There's people here already. We can't just claim it. And so they went down to an island further south and claimed that and said, this is the land which will be Australia. Or I'm not remembering this very accurately, but have a listen to this video. And then they came back in and they tried to fight. There were people within the government, the white government, that were fighting over, do we just ignore these sovereign people or can we take it over? And it was all done slightly crooked anyway. So they'd never agreed to a treaty. There was no treaty, not like New Zealand. New Zealand had a treaty, but there was no treaty here. And they never gave up their right to the land. So they are the sovereign beings of this continent. And they are currently working with lawyers to create a brand new constitution, because we were trying to get back to the 1901 constitution, which was for the Queen of England. But we don't want to go back to that either. We had Australians go to the Privy Council in England and say, hey, we've got this government, this rogue government that set themselves up in the 1970s and 80s, loyal to the Queen of Australia, which doesn't exist, so they can basically do whatever they like. We need your help. Come and invade us. Come and get us back again. And the Privy Council said it's out of our hands. Just you'll need to sort it out yourself. Which means that in this video, they're saying the Queen actually gave up her rights and walked away. So maybe she or the Crown knew that they had no rights over Australia. So it's really now between the original people and this rogue government. And that's why they're trying to turn us against the original people. And it's not going to work.
Oh, no, it's not going to work. So I've always thought Privy Council was such a funny word because privy is a toilet. And are these the guys that go with the king when he goes to the toilet and wipes him?
Yes.
Is that how they get on the Privy Council?
That's the ultimate intimate circle of the king.
Oh, God.
Still
Kind of funny.
Appropriate these days, right?
Okay, so my sister recently sent me a cute joke, and it's an egg and a chicken in bed. They're half under the covers, and the egg is sitting there looking like this. How does an egg do that? I don't know, but it sort of has that look. And the chicken is, and it says, I guess this answers that age-old question. And everyone knows the age-old question, so it's I thought that was a very good joke. Lighten it up a little bit.
There's another little video, I'm just going to put it as the final link, that is of this beautiful channeler. And she channels the Pleiadians, and it just bursts out of her whenever she gives permission. Her. And it just, whoa, let's go, and she talks slightly differently.
I like her.
The character that she's channeling is so delicious, so beautiful. And she's also saying, lighten up, relax, enjoy the present moment. You're doing great, and it's just beautiful. So I'll put that in as well.
Awesome. Oh, we were just, Annabelle, you and I were just looking at this too, because we didn't talk about this yet. But when we checked in with our support team up there, they said one of the things that is really shifting now is the financial.
Oh, yeah.
They've been waiting to flip from the old system to the new system, and we're doing that now. And I know for a lot of people, that system has kept you in a really tense, depressed, miserable, threatened state. But that was really good news that that's starting to flip. And I'm not actually sure how that's going to roll out, but my intuitive information, is that they basically have already set up the new system. It's already ready to go. You've heard stories about banks being closed, or the online stuff doesn't work for periods of time, and some personal stories of people talking to bankers and so forth. And the banker said, don't tell anybody this, but blah, 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 blah. So as with everything else, they're doing it as smoothly as possible with as little drama as possible. So you may not even notice it. And there are people all over the place who are talking about, whoa, I just got a note on my mortgage that it's paid in full, and things like that, or student loans, or credit card debt, all those kinds of bank things. So
what I'd like to know, though, with the QFS is that it sounds like the kind of thing that won't require banks. That's another reason why you have to have the whole thing well and truly set up. If we need a smooth transition, that you don't sack everybody and cause a whole lot of trauma, you have to be able to go, here's some money, and by the way, you've lost your job. You have to do it the other way around.
Right. And whether at this point we see, here's some money on a mass level, or just bits and pieces of, you no longer have a mortgage, you don't have any credit card debt, blah, 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 all those things. That's part of the plan. Yeah. And you can't go like this and this and have it be smooth. It's got to be a organic curve. And I think that's what we'll be seeing.
So patience required then.
Such a relief. And the timing that we got, God, do you remember the timing? Like, it's not going to be, oh, by Christmas, it's all done. Everybody's going to be rich. That's not what's going to be happening. Unfortunately, that would be really fun, right?
That would be
but
fun.
It is going to be continuing, and you're going to be hearing more and more stories of this stuff happening. And it's going to start coming out in the media too, right? That's, and then people are going to start going, wait a minute, could that happen to me? And then that puts this hope and this projection, this, anticipation, which is like, ooh, this is happening. This could happen to me too. All right, that'll get that off me. And that's what really drives it, is when people start to believe it's possible.
Yeah.
Right. My favorite
frequency, right?
Yeah. My favorite quote that I wrote is, don't believe everything you believe. Huh? I was trying to get the feeling of that onto a sketch. It's like, you say, don't believe everything you think, but what you think is based on what you believe. So it's like, being willing to take those beliefs and let them go. Don't believe everything you believe. When you have a different belief, that's what shifts it. And believe me, going around and saying to your mirror, I love myself, or putting little sticky notes about, I'm going to be a millionaire, the lottery is working for me or whatever. That's not what does it if you still have the belief deep in your core, right?
Yeah.
So
resonance is not matching.
Yeah. And resonance is a big, important theme astrologically this month.
Oh, tell us a bit about that.
Okay. So we're starting a new eclipse season. And the first one happens on the 19th of November. So eclipses last a little over 2 years, the season usually, and it's in 2 signs and it stays that way. And then it flips to 2 opposite signs. And it's been in Gemini, Sagittarius, which is where my sun and moon are. So it's been like, but it's flipping over to Taurus and Scorpio. And the first event we see on that, like I said, is on the 19th, which is a partial lunar eclipse in Taurus. And then it goes back to Scorpio for the next solar eclipse. So you've got a lunar eclipse, 2 weeks later, a solar eclipse. So during a lunar eclipse, that's what you think there is endings. That means sun opposite moon. And that's like, okay, things can close now. This part of my life is done. I can look at the results of my previous choices. And then the solar eclipses are when the sun and moon are aligned like a new moon. And that's when you can start a new thing, new potential opportunities that you can start to set that with your beliefs and your intention, right? So the theme of Gemini and Sagittarius, Gemini is about communication and polarity, the twins, right? And Sagittarius is this great, huge explorer where no man has been before, that kind of thing. So the contradiction of those 2 energies, of the polarity of thinking, Gemini, with the great expansive, we're going there, Sagittarius, has been a huge theme, right? So the moving into this next one, and it's like everything like this, it's a gradual curve, is the idea of this is a new opportunity and new belief systems can happen in the theme of Taurus and Scorpio. So Taurus is that luxury beauty. One of the things I think most about Taurus is the appreciation of beauty, which is a spiritual practice. And I also think of the Egyptian word nefer, which is translated by most Egyptologists as just being beauty, but it represents beauty and harmony and resonance of nature. What a lovely theme, right? And it also has to do with abundance. It's luxurious. It's got your garden is full of flowers, all of that. Scorpio has sort of a misunderstanding. What the energy of Scorpio is really is deeply going into the intensity, the emotional intensity, and mastering it. And that makes me think of the book Initiation, where she talks about her previous experience in ancient Egypt as a priestess, going through the initiation, and their practice to prepare for it is to go through various processes of experiencing all the emotions and finding eventually that the emotions aren't caused by the external experience, they happen in here. So that's the mastery of the intensity of the emotions. That's what we're being supported in, to be the master of that and not get reactive, and to bring in the beauty, the luxuriousness, and the harmony of the Taurus energy. On November 1st, Venus crossed the galactic center, which is at about 27 degrees of Sagittarius. So Venus is the feminine energy associated with Taurus. And it's the beauty, the abundance, all that groovy stuff. So when the galactic center is lined up with us to their doom, that's when they get sort of a reboot of their programming, you could say. This is our new energy you're going to be presenting, reflecting back to the people with the Venus feminine luxury beauty energy. So that's kind of cool. And just a few days after that, on the 4th, there's a new moon in Scorpio, and that's a super moon. So you won't see it because it's a new moon, but that's when the moon is closest to us, to our planet. So it's got a little bit more effect. On the 5th, Venus moves into Capricorn. Now, Capricorn has been a big focus for years. We've got Pluto, Scorpio, Jupiter, all in there. All that's left now is Pluto. Capricorn, of course, represents the old energy, patriarchal, power over people, right? The rigid stuff. But it also represents the human rule. So it's not a negative thing. We need to have Capricorn, like we need to have the 4 elements in order to exist here, right? So none of this is just all positive or negative. So Venus has just gotten reinformed on the new energy and is joining Capricorn and is going to conjunct Pluto, who's ending Capricorn, and inform Pluto, our deep dark into the shadow of the new feminine energy. So I think that's what we're starting to feel when we start to feel a relief, because there's been so much, Capricorn to me feels very masculine, very rigid. It's structure. And then Venus is purely the feminine. And Jupiter and Saturn have left Capricorn, and it's like, whew, relief. But now we have Venus going back again. I think that's really cool. So then we've got, of course, 11/11, right?
Now, what is 11/11 about?
Ultimately, oneness. It's all oneness. That's that harmony. It's
because isn't that the twin flames as well? When you have 11/11 as twin flames,
it could be. Yeah, I'm not. I haven't experienced that, but I have experienced the feeling of the alignment or the resonance, like you were talking about. That happens on that day. So these are just things you can look at and focus on those days. When you're going to set your intention. You've got this new moon in Scorpio. I'm going to get very clear on my emotions in this next period of time. I'm going to feel them and master them, not suppress them. And that includes other people's emotions for those empathic folks out there. And most of us are, because other people are going to be getting really emotional. So get your mastery of this on now. This is your opportunity. So it's on the 19th that we get a partial lunar eclipse. That one's in Taurus. And what that's sort of seeing the results of your jumping into the Scorpio energy. Have you mastered your emotions? Are you starting to feel like, oh, it's okay. It's okay to enjoy my day, to be out in nature and go, the air smells good today. I don't have to worry about all this stuff. I don't have to be upset about anything today. So that's sort of the theme of the first few weeks of November. And I just thought that might be helpful.
Beautiful. That's really good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that kind of wraps it up. I think we've done a huge amount today. Haven't we? Didn't we do well? But if you've got any comments or any questions for us that you'd like us to explore in future episodes, feel free to put them down below.
Please do.
Delighted to be here with you. Yeah. So keep smiling. Enjoy yourself.
Thanks for being with us. Bye.
Bye.